Hello everyone. It's been a while, but the All-State Excerpts just came out a few days ago, so I'm gonna give you some tips on them. Yeah, they're not easy this year, but I think once you know what's going on in each of them, they should be pretty manageable. So yeah, also I just realized I never made a video on the Fiorillo Etude, so let me know if you guys want that video. I could give you some tips. But anyway, let's get into the excerpts. Now, in general, this is kind of obvious, and I think you all should already be doing this, hopefully, but make sure you're practicing very slowly and with a metronome, just for intonation and rhythmic accuracy, like keeping a constant tempo. It's really nice that they give you all these very specific metronome markings. And so what I like to do, once I have a metronome marking for something I'm playing, is I take the metronome and maybe mark it down like 30 or 40 beats. So like this first one is 132, so I would maybe put the metronome at 92. And after practicing through some of the hard bits, I would put it at 92 and then play through it, and then bump it up by 10, and then play through it again, and like that. That really helps. Make sure you're listening for intonation, of course, but it helps solidify it. Your hands kind of start to know what they're doing. So yeah, now specifically, let's start with the first excerpt, the Tchaikovsky. Now, probably the hardest part about this excerpt, if you look at the second line, 449. This is kind of a little awkward bowing. And so make sure you don't spend too much on the 3/16ths that are slurred, and because then you have to use a lot of bow on the down bow, and then it just sounds like accented and awkward. It's going to be hard to keep it even. So don't spend too much bow on those three notes, and then you can kind of save on the single note. This also helps so you don't accent every beat. You can bring out a line, maybe crescendo through this like ascending line. So yeah, and now probably the hardest part about this though is keeping all these notes even. Like even when I just played it just now, it wasn't very even. And so make sure you practice this a lot in rhythms. Like, and then after that, you go. Right, and so on. That'll help your evenness. Make sure, again, when you're doing rhythms, whenever you stop in between each like little section, little grouping, you're thinking exactly like where your fingers need to go for the next note, and then you go. Like there's a lot of like active thought involved. Okay, and that'll help that part really sparkle. Now, I would practice a lot on these descending lines, like right after this, the third line. Maybe the shifts are a little hard, so I would do just stop and start. Or with whatever your fingering is. If you want, just let me know in the comments. I could give you guys some fingering help if you want that. Yeah. Now, I think there was something else. I would do the same thing if you look the third to last line. Just stop and start. Right, and then in between each of these, it's kind of awkward for your fingers when you're going fast, so yeah, so a lot of stopping and starting I think will help in this one, in addition to all your slow practice and your rhythms. So in the second excerpt, this is Pictures at an Exhibition. What's really important about this one is the dynamic variety. There's a huge range of dynamics. Make sure you bring all of them out. It goes from, at one point it's piano, and another point it's fortissimo. And there's lots of different like little crescendos in between. Sometimes it's mezzo forte, sometimes it's forte. Make sure you bring out those differences. And like accents, sforzandos. I think that's what the judges are going to be looking for in this one. So really pay attention to that. Now, this little lick at the beginning is kind of difficult because, again, like the other excerpt, it's hard to stay even. The reason is because you're changing your bow stroke. You're going from single bows to a slur, like. So I think just practicing in like stopping and starting, so stopping right before that slur, so you can have that mental switch, so you're ready for the slur and you can make it even. Also, rhythms will help your evenness there, but if you can make the 16ths like very consistent in that line, it'll sound great. Okay. Now, some of the pizzicatos here are kind of difficult. If you look like around square 68, this is the third to last line. A lot of these are E naturals. I would just use a left-hand pizz. It makes it easier. So like 2 measures before square 68, we have. That's. Right. So I'm just plucking because it's too hard. It's just easier. Now, so there's some double stops in here, some chords. If you look before square 66, it specifies divisi. Oh, whoops. Right. Then you notice it says a unison on that chord, so that means you should probably play that chord. And from there on out, it never says divisi. So I would go ahead and do all these double stops. It's 13, it's easy. And then here you have, so I'm doing 4-1 open. Now these are kind of hard. 1, 2, 3 is what I'm doing. Now this is G, the right fourth square 67. This is G, D sharp, B. These are all very right next to each other, so it's pretty easy to find it actually if you just do 1, 2, 3. Now you keep that same fingering slide up. Now the spacing is a little different now. You have to change your hand shape, so just be active about thinking about that. The distance between the G and the E on this next chord is a little more. See how there's space right there. So to go. And then I just keep that fingering for all these. Just be really active about like what your hand shape needs to be, the spacing between your fingers on those, and you'll be fine on the chords. Okay, and again, like right at measure 17, that's a really good spot to bring out those dynamics. That's a big contrast. Right. Okay, so now if we look at measure 25, a talon, that means by the frog, in case you didn't know. So just be by the frog. Now this little chromatic scale, this is glissando. I don't think that's what it means. It's more, I would play like an actual fingering down in first position maybe. Just maybe don't worry about being super clean, like, right? Because it's got to have that little slide effect, so just. Now keep the 16ths even here. I'm not saying to make it messy that way. I think just maybe as you shift between each half step, it doesn't have to be like a super fast clean shift, just to give it the slide effect. But keep the 16ths even. Yeah, and then there's one thing that kind of bothers me in measure 22. There's a natural sign marked. It would be natural. That should actually be a B flat. If you listen to recordings, they all play it that way, and that's also how it's marked in the score. So maybe keep your eye out for errata, because that's a pretty clear mistake. It's supposed to be, you look at square 68, it just continues. But for whatever reason, they have a natural mark, which is, I think it's just wrong. But until you hear for sure from TMEA, because they'll have official errata, and if they don't say anything, I would continue playing what's in the music, even if it's wrong, because they're usually pretty strict about that. So play the B natural unless you hear otherwise. Yeah, that about does it for this excerpt. Alright, so this brings us to number 3, the symphonic dances. Now this is actually not that hard. It's very fast, but once you get it down, it's kind of under your fingers. All of these little 16th note passages that appear also later in the excerpt, just make sure you have a good fingering and be mindful of the string crossings, and that'll get you through it. If you know exactly where you're supposed to be crossing strings, it'll help your evenness and it'll sound really good. You practice, again, stopping and starting rhythms, so stopping right before the string crossing and then going, and then your rhythms, of course. Yeah, and those will sound fine. Now, make sure in this third measure you play the rhythm correctly. So if I'm going from the second measure, it's easy to want to play these 16th as a pickup, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But that's not what it is. Make sure you accent the F natural, this high F natural, on the beat, because we're in 3 here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it's 2. It comes in on 2. 1. Yeah. And that happens again with some different notes next time. And some of these intervals are kind of hard to get. Just practicing slowly with a metronome, listening for intonation. Make sure you have a good fingering, and it should be fine. Now, one other thing, there's a little ricochet. There's a measure with some ricochet. This is before 65. 3 bars, 4 bars. I can't tell. But you see it. It's alright. So it's important that we make these even. This is probably if the judges pick an excerpt from here, it's probably going to include this. They want to see if you can do the ricochet. And so what I would do, I'd practice, take out the middle note. Just play 8th notes, bouncing near the upper half. And now just add in the middle note. What you can also do is play very slowly, so you can control it exactly and make it even. And now I would maybe do it with a metronome, and then you can bring up the speed gradually until you have a nice even ricochet. Yeah, I think that's it for this one. Now the 4th excerpt, Free Radicals. I've never heard of this piece. I haven't heard of this composer. I think he's a modern composer. Now the reason they put this on here is because of all these weird rhythms. It's technically not very difficult at all, especially compared to the others. It's just they want to see if you can count, basically, see if you can do the rhythms. And so what's going to help a lot for this one is listening to it over and over until you just kind of understand innately how it's supposed to sound. And now the problem is I couldn't really find any recordings of it. I did manage to find, I think on SoundCloud, there was an excerpt from it that included parts of this excerpt. So I'll link that. I would really recommend listening a lot to it. Yeah, to do these rhythms, you just have to subdivide. Find the lowest common denominator. like for most of the cases, it's a 16th note. You want to be thinking in 16th notes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. Now right at square E, again thinking in 16th notes. This looks hard. It's not that hard. You just, each dotted eighth gets 3/16ths, right? And each quarter rest gets 4/16ths. So just think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so subdividing is going to help you out a lot here. And there's some scales. Just make sure you have a good fingering, you'll be fine. Now the measure before E is maybe a little difficult. You can't really think in 16ths here because it's triplets, so think in eighths. If this whole time we've been thinking in 16ths, it should be pretty easy to switch, because like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So just I would practice that, just mentally switching between thinking eighths and 16ths, and you should be fine here. I think soon I'll record all these excerpts, and you can listen to me playing it. Hopefully that'll help. Yeah. Thank you for watching. I hope all my tips were helpful. Now remember, like I said in the beginning, practice slowly a lot with the metronome, and listen for intonation. Like, you should be doing that a lot. All my pointers here I give you are I'm kind of assuming that you're already doing that, listening for intonation and practicing slowly separately. So don't just take that for granted. Make sure you put a lot of work in there. And also listen to these pieces a lot. I know for the fourth excerpt, I don't think there's really I couldn't find any good full recordings, but for the others, those are classic pieces, some of the most iconic in the repertoire actually. It's really fun music. So yeah, you should listen, and just listen to how your part interacts with the other parts, so you can bring that out in your audition. That's what the judges want to hear. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have questions, just leave it in the comments. I'd be happy to answer. Yeah, see you next time.